terminally ill father miraculously awakens after hearing his 12-year-old daughter's touching call. The storm was pounding Boston with relentless fury that October night. The corridors of Massachusetts General Hospital were silent, except for the constant sound of heart monitors and the occasional squeak of medication cartwheels. In room 507, Alice Mason, now 12, held tightly onto the hand of her father, Marcos, as she had done every night for as long as she could remember. Clara Mason watched her daughter from the armchair in the room, her face marked by the fatigue of 6 long years of waiting. Her brown eyes, although exhausted, never lost that glint of determination that had kept her strong all this time. Her brown hair, now with a few prematurely gray strands, was tied up in a messy bun. "Dad," Alice whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "the storm is strong today. Remember when you used to tell me that thunder was just the clouds bowling? I miss those stories." She ran her fingers through her father's dark hair, now speckled with white, the result of years of lying motionless in that bed. The accident that changed their lives happened on a night similar to this one. Marcos was returning from a business trip when his car skidded on the wet road. The impact was devastating, leaving him in a vegetative state and changing his family's life forever. Alice was only 6 at the time, too young to fully understand what had happened, but old enough to feel the pain of her father's absence. Clara got up from the armchair and approached her daughter. "Darling, it's getting late. We need to go home." Her words were soft, but carried the weight of thousands of similar nights. "Just 5 more minutes, Mom," Alice pleaded, her blue eyes, identical to her father's, shining with restrained tears. "Today I have to tell him about my presentation at school." Clara nodded, unable to deny her daughter this moment. All these years, Alice had never stopped believing that her father could hear her. She told him about her day, her achievements, her fears and dreams. For Clara, it was both comforting and painful to see the strength of this connection. "Dad," Alice continued, "today I did a presentation on heroes at school. Do you know who I chose as my hero? You. I told the whole class how strong you are, how you fight every day to get back to us." Professor Winters said it was the most moving presentation she'd ever seen. A particularly loud clap of thunder shook the hospital windows, making Alice squeeze her father's hand tighter. "I'm scared, Dad," she admitted, the tears finally escaping. "Sometimes, when it's this dark and noisy, I remember that night. Please, Daddy, I need you so much." That's when it happened. A subtle, almost imperceptible movement in Marcos' fingers. Clara, who was packing her bag to leave, froze in place. Alice held her breath, her wide eyes fixed on her father's hand. "Mom?" she called, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara quickly approached the bed, her heart pounding wildly. "Marcos?" she called, leaning over her husband. Marcos' fingers moved again, this time more visibly. His eyelids, which had remained closed for so long, began to flutter. Alice and Clara watched, paralyzed, as he slowly opened his eyes. "Nurse!" Clara shouted, her voice echoing down the corridor. "Someone, please!" Marcos, blue eyes, although disoriented, focused first on Alice. A small sound escaped from his throat, as if he were trying to speak. Alice sobbed, a sound somewhere between laughing and crying. "Dad, can you hear me?" she asked, her hands shaking as she held his. The medical team burst into the room seconds later, moving urgently around the bed. Dr. Richardson, the neurologist who had been with Marcos since the beginning, immediately began performing response tests. "Mr. Mason, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand," he instructed. Marcos responded with a gentle squeeze, causing a wave of surprised exclamations from the team. Clara hugged Alice, both of them crying openly now. 6 years of waiting, of praying, of hoping against all odds, were culminating in this extraordinary moment. "It's a miracle," whispered Nurse Beverly, who had cared for Marcos for years. The next few hours were a whirlwind of examinations, tests, and specialists coming in and out of the room. Alice refused to let go of her father's hand, as if she feared he might disappear if she did. Clara alternated between moments of absolute joy and anxious worry about what lay ahead. Outside, the storm began to subside, as if nature recognized that its fury was no longer necessary. A new dawn was approaching, bringing with it the start of a journey that no one was truly prepared to face. Dr. Richardson finally gathered Clara and Alice in his office, while other doctors continued to monitor Marcos. "What happened tonight is extraordinary," he began, his professional tone barely masking his own admiration. "But I need you to understand that this is only the beginning. The recovery will be long and challenging." Clara nodded, squeezing Alice's hand. "We're ready for anything, Doctor. We've been waiting for this moment for 6 years." "Yes," Alice agreed, her voice steady despite her tears. "We'll help Dad with everything he needs." As they walked back to Marcos' room, Clara knew that their lives were about to change drastically once again. But this time, the change brought with it a promise of hope, of a fresh start, of a second chance for her family. The sun was beginning to rise over the Boston skyline, its first rays penetrating through the dissipating clouds. A new day was beginning, and with it, a new story for the Masons. A story of recovery, of rediscovery, and above all, of the transformative power of love that never gave up. The morning after Marcos woke up brought a different energy to Massachusetts General Hospital. Room 507, once so quiet, was now buzzing with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Clara stayed by her husband's side throughout the night, watching his every move as if it were a precious treasure. "I'm taking Alice home so she can get some rest and get ready for school," said Lauren Mitchell, Clara's neighbor and best friend, who had arrived as soon as she heard the news. "Do you need anything?" Clara shook her head negatively, her eyes fixed on Marcos, who was sleeping naturally for the first time in 6 years. Alice, reluctant to leave her father, approached the bed. "I'll be back after school, Dad," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "I promise I won't be long." As soon as she was alone with Marcos, Clara allowed the tears, hitherto contained, to flow freely. 6 years of unwavering strength, brave smiles and iron determination were beginning to give way to a whirlwind of emotions that she could barely process. Richardson entered the room, accompanied by a multidisciplinary team. "Mrs. Mason, we need to talk about the recovery plan," he began, his tone gentle but professional. "Your husband's awakening is extraordinary, but we have a long way to go." The team explained the rehabilitation process in detail. Marcos would need to relearn practically everything: speaking, swallowing, moving. His memory and cognitive ability would also need to be assessed extensively. "The first week will be crucial," explained Dr. Rachel Newman, the physiotherapist. "We'll start with basic exercises as soon as he's more awake and oriented." Marcos woke up during the meeting, his blue eyes scanning the room with a mixture of confusion and fear. Clara was immediately by his side, holding his hand. "It's all right, love," she whispered. "You're safe. We're all here with you." The doctors began a series of basic tests. To everyone's relief, Marcos was able to respond to simple commands, shaking hands and moving his eyes as requested. When he tried to speak, however, only incomprehensible sounds came from his throat. "It's completely normal," assured speech therapist Patricia Reynolds. "The vocal cords need to be rehabilitated, just like the rest of the body." Throughout the day, a constant procession of specialists came in and out of the room. Each one brought a new perspective, a new challenge to overcome. Clara absorbed each piece of information like a sponge, making meticulous notes in her notebook. In the middle of the afternoon, Lauren brought Alice back to the hospital. The little girl ran into the room, her eyes shining with anticipation. Marcos, who was dozing off, woke up to the sound of her footsteps. "Dad," she exclaimed, more restrained now, remembering the doctor's advice not to overload him. "Look what I've brought." She took out a small photo album from her bag. "It's all the photos I've taken over the years, so you can see everything that happened while you were asleep." Clara watched, thrilled, as Alice showed the photos to her father. Each picture told a story: birthdays, graduations, special moments that Marcos had missed. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at the photographs, and Clara could feel her frustration at not being able to put her feelings into words. "Don't worry, Dad," Alice said softly, noticing his distress. "We have all the time in the world now." In the evening, after Alice had gone home again with Lauren, Clara faced her first truly lonely moment with Marcos. The silence between them was laden with unspoken words, lost years, and an uncertain future. "Remember when we first met?" she began, her voice soft in the dimness of the room. "You said I was the strongest person you'd ever met. Well, these last 6 years have proved you wrong. I was only strong because I had our Alice. She's just like you, you know. She has the same determination, the same unshakable faith." Marcos squeezed her hand lightly, and Clara saw tears streaming down his face. She gently wiped them away, allowing herself, for the first time in a long time, to feel the full extent of her love for him. The doctors say it will be difficult, she continued, but we've already faced the impossible, haven't we? You've come back to us. The rest we'll sort out together. The next morning, the first physiotherapy session began. Dr. Newman worked with passive movements, exercising each of Marcos' muscles with meticulous care. Clara watched, memorizing each exercise so that she could help later. Excellent muscle response, commented the physiotherapist. There's a good chance we can regain significant mobility with the right time and dedication. The speech therapist also began her work, starting with basic swallowing and breathing exercises. Marcos pushed himself with every attempt, his determination evident in every little bit of progress. At the end of that second day, Dr. Richardson met with Clara again. We're cautiously optimistic, he said. The initial response is above expectations, but we need to keep expectations realistic. Each case is unique, and the brain has its own mysteries. Clara nodded, understanding the delicacy of the situation. Doctor, she hesitated. How long until we know if he remembers everything? If he's still himself? Memory is complex, Mrs. Mason. Some patients recover all their memories. Others have gaps. The important thing now is to focus on physical recovery and give the brain time to reorganize itself. When she was finally alone with Marcos that night, Clara found herself remembering all the moments they had shared before the accident. The laughs, the silly fights, the dreams they had built together. Now, looking at the man she loved, she knew they would have to build new memories, new dreams. We'll make it, she promised, both to him and to herself. One day at a time, one step at a time. Our story isn't over, Marcos. It's just beginning again. Outside, the lights of Boston shone against the night sky, like thousands of tiny earthly stars. Clara thought of Alice, asleep at home, of all the people who supported them, of the long journey ahead of them. The fear was still there, mixed with hope, but now there was something else, the certainty that, no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. The heart monitor maintained its steady rhythm, a familiar melody that now carried a new promise. Clara closed her eyes, allowing herself to rest for the first time in 2 days, her hand still intertwined with Marcos. Tomorrow would be another challenging day, but for now, in this moment of peace, it was enough to know that he was there, breathing, alive, present. The first week after Marcos woke up brought a new routine to Massachusetts General Hospital. Room 507 was transformed into a makeshift rehabilitation center, where every little bit of progress was celebrated as a great victory. That Wednesday morning, Dr. Newman was working with Marcos on strengthening exercises when it happened. He was able to raise his right arm independently for the first time. The movement, although shaky and limited, drew exclamations of surprise and joy from everyone present. "Extraordinary, Mr. Mason," exclaimed the physiotherapist. Her face lit up with a genuine smile. "You see, Clara, motor control is returning faster than we expected." Clara, who watched each session with meticulous attention, struggled to hold back the tears. Next to her, Nurse Beverly was making detailed notes in the chart, recording yet another significant advance. "Muscles have memory," explained Dr. Newman, adjusting the position of Marcos' arm. "Even after so long in a vegetative state, the body keeps a subconscious record of movements. Our task is to reactivate these muscle memories." In the afternoon, speech therapist Patricia worked with Marcos on vocal exercises. After days of incomprehensible sounds, he was finally able to articulate his first clear word, Alice. The moment was captured on video by Clara, who knew her daughter would be ecstatic to see her father's progress. The word, although pronounced with difficulty, carried all the love and longing accumulated during the years of silence. "That's right, love," Clara encouraged, holding his hand. "Alice will be so happy when she sees this." Dr. Richardson, during his daily visit, was particularly impressed with the progress. "The speed of initial recovery is promising," he commented, reviewing the reports, "but we need to keep expectations realistic. There will be ups and downs in this process." In the afternoon, when Alice arrived home from school, she brought renewed energy into the room. Her eyes lit up when she saw her father more alert than in the previous days. "Dad, you won't believe it," she exclaimed, pulling something out of her backpack. "Remember Richard, that boy who picked on me? Today he apologized to me in front of the whole class. He said he really admired my presentation about you. Marcos tried to smile, a move that was still difficult for his weakened facial muscles, but his eyes conveyed all the pride that his expressions couldn't yet show. She, he managed to say again, making the girl jump for joy. Mom, he said my name. Alice hugged Clara tightly. Did you hear? He said my name. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Daniel Foster, the occupational therapist who would begin working with Marcos. He brought with him a series of simple objects, balls of different sizes, colored blocks and picture cards. Today we're going to start with fine motor coordination exercises, explained Daniel, positioning the objects on the side table. Every little movement is a step towards independence. Clara watched as Marcos struggled to hold the objects. His hands trembled with the effort, and frustration was visible on his face when he couldn't complete the simplest tasks. Patience, Mr. Mason, Daniel instructed gently. Rome wasn't built in a day. Alice Kahn, who had taken a seat on the other side of the bed, began to encourage her father with every attempt. You can do it, Dad. Remember when you taught me to ride a bike? You said the secret was to never give up, even after you've fallen. His daughter's words seemed to touch something deep within Marcos. With renewed effort, he managed to hold one of the colored blocks and move it a few centimeters on the table. Excellent, exclaimed Daniel. See? Every attempt gets a little easier. Later that afternoon, after Alice had gone home with Lauren, Clara had her first serious conversation with the hospital's social worker, Michael Reynolds. We need to start planning the transition home, he explained. It will be necessary to make some adaptations to the environment, and you will need specific equipment and specialized care. Clara nodded, her mind already calculating costs and logistics. The insurance would cover part of the costs, but she knew there would be significant expenses ahead. There's a support group for families in a similar situation, Michael continued. They meet twice a week here at the hospital. I think it would be beneficial for you and Alice to take part. That evening, after all the professionals had left, Clara sat down next to Marcos for their nightly ritual of conversation. You're doing very well, she said softly. I know it must be frustrating, but you're progressing faster than anyone expected. Marcos moved his hand towards her, a gesture that was becoming firmer by the day. Clara intertwined her fingers with his, feeling the familiar warmth of his touch. Do you know what I miss most? She continued, her voice laced with emotion. Our conversations at night, when Alice was already asleep, those moments when we planned for the future, shared our fears and dreams. A tear escaped from Marcos' eye, and Clara gently wiped it away. But we'll have that again, she promised. In a different way, perhaps, but we will. You're coming back to us. A little more every day. The silence that followed was no longer as heavy as before. Now it was full of promises, small victories, and the certainty that each day would bring new progress. Outside, the city of Boston was beginning to fall asleep, its lights twinkling against the dark sky like earthly stars. Clara thought of all the people who were helping them on this journey, the tireless doctors, the dedicated therapists, the loyal friends. Tomorrow is a new day, she whispered, more to herself than to Marcos, and every day is a new chance to overcome our limits. The soft sound of Marcos breathing filled the room, now stronger and more regular than in previous days. Clara closed her eyes, allowing herself to dream of the day they would return home, when her family would finally be reunited under one roof. The journey would be long, she knew, but today they had proved that miracles happen in the smallest gestures, in the simplest words, in the love that overcomes all barriers. Dawn brought a significant change to room 507. It was time for Marcos' first full neuropsychological assessment, a moment that Clara had both longed for and dreaded. Dr. Olivia Bennett, a brain trauma specialist, arrived early, carrying a folder full of tests and evaluations. Good morning, Mr. Mason, she greeted with a warm smile. Today we're going to explore your memories and cognitive functions a little. Don't worry, we'll go slowly. Clara sat in a corner of the room, her heart beating fast as she watched the assessment begin. Dr. Bennett began with simple questions. Full name, date of birth, names of close family members. Marcos, Anthony, Mason, he answered slowly, each word a small victory. I was born in Portland. The doctor nodded encouragingly. Very good. And what is your wife's name? Clara, came the reply more quickly this time. his eyes searching the room for his wife. "And your daughter?" "Alice. My Alice." He smiled slightly, the first genuine smile since he had woken up. As the assessment progressed, it became clear that Marcos' memory was like a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces. He remembered old events clearly, his marriage to Clara, Alice's birth, but the years immediately before the accident were hazy. "It's common in cases like yours," explained Dr. Bennett. "The brain sometimes protects certain memories while others need to be gradually reconstructed." The hardest part came when the doctor asked about the accident. Marcos became visibly agitated, his heart monitor registering an increase in heart rate. "Rain," he muttered, his hands starting to shake. "Dark, very dark." "It's all right," Clara intervened, moving quickly to his side. "We don't need to talk about it now." Dr. Bennett made a few notes before continuing. "Mr. Mason, I'm going to show you some photographs. I want you to tell me what you recognize." The images were varied: old family photos, recent events that happened during his coma, faces of people he should have known. Each answer revealed more about the state of his memory. "This is from our wedding." He correctly identified an old photo, but when shown a recent photograph of Alice at her school presentation, his eyes filled with tears. "She's so big." Clara struggled to keep her composure. It was painful to see her husband realize how much time he had wasted, how much of his daughter's life he had lost. "The results are promising, Dr. Bennett concluded after 2 hours of evaluation. "Long-term memory is well preserved, and basic cognitive functions are returning, but we need to work on recent memory and emotional processing." During lunch, while Nurse Beverly was helping Marcos with his first semi-solid meal, Clara received an unexpected call from Alice's school. "Mrs. Mason, this is the guidance counselor, Rebecca Wilson. Alice had a difficult time today during science class. She started crying when the teacher mentioned the central nervous system." Clara sighed deeply. "I'll go and get her." "That's not necessary," Rebecca assured her. "She's calmer now, but I think it's important that you talk about this at home. Alice is carrying a lot of complex emotions." When Alice arrived at the hospital after school, she was quieter than usual. She sat down next to her father's bed and began to do her homework in silence. "Darling," Clara called softly, "Mrs. Wilson called me. Do you want to talk about what happened today?" Alice bit her lip, in a way that reminded her so much of Marcos that Clara's heart squeezed. "It's just that, what if Dad doesn't remember everything? What if he doesn't remember the stories I used to tell him while he slept?" "I remember," Marcos interrupted, his voice firmer than usual. "You sang to me." Alice's eyes widened. "You could hear me, sometimes, like a dream," he explained with difficulty. "Your voice kept me here." Clara watched father and daughter share this precious moment, realizing that some memories transcended consciousness, existing in a place deeper than any trauma could reach. In the evening, after Alice had gone home, Clara found Marcos crying silently. "What is it, love?" she asked, sitting down next to him. "I've lost so much," he managed to say. "Years, our little girl, but you're here now." She held his hand tightly. "And there's still so much ahead of you. Alice doesn't need the father you were before. She needs the father you are now." The rest of the evening was spent in comfortable silence, interrupted only by the soft sounds of the hospital. Clara picked up the photo album Alice had brought and started showing Marcos the pictures again, this time telling him the stories behind each one. "This was from Alice's first recital," she explained, showing a photo of her daughter at the age of 8. "She insisted on playing her favorite song, the one you always sang her to sleep." Marcos touched the photograph gently, as if he could feel the moment through the paper. Clara kept turning the pages, filling in the gaps in her memory with stories, laughter, and a few tears. "Do you know what Alice said to me the other day?" Clara commented, closing the album. "That she now has 2 stories to tell, the one before you woke up and the one we're starting now." A small smile appeared on Marcos' face, and Clara saw in it a glimpse of the man she had known all those years ago. The memories may have been fragmented, but the love that united them remained intact, serving as a bridge over the abyss of lost time. Outside, Boston continued its nocturnal dance of lights and shadows, indifferent to the small dramas unfolding inside room 507. But for the Mason family, every moment was precious. Every recovered memory was a treasure, and each new day brought the promise of more stories to share. The 10th day after Mark's awakening brought a significant change to the hospital environment. The medical team had decided it was time to start preparing for his eventual discharge, even though this was still some weeks away. Room 507 was transformed into an even more intense activity center, with new rehabilitation equipment arriving and a rigorous schedule of therapies. Clara arrived early that morning, carrying a thick folder with insurance documents and estimates for the necessary adaptations at home. She found Marcos already awake, his gaze fixed on the window, watching the sun rise over the buildings of Boston. "Good morning, love," she greeted, noticing something different in his expression. "Did you sleep well?" Marcos turned slowly towards her, his eyes revealing a restlessness that Clara hadn't seen before. "Nightmare," he managed to say, his voice still hoarse from sleep. "Do you want to talk about it?" Before he could answer, Dr. Newman came in for her morning physiotherapy session, bringing with her a special walker. "We're going to try something new today, Mr. Mason. Are you ready to stand?" The process of lifting Marcos was painstaking and required the help of 2 assistants. His legs, weak after 6 years of inactivity, trembled violently under his weight. Beads of sweat ran down his face as he struggled to keep his balance. "Take a deep breath," advised Dr. Newman. "Concentrate on keeping your core stable." Clara watched, her heart squeezing, as her husband struggled against gravity. After a few grueling minutes, his legs gave way and the team had to help him back to bed. "Damn it," he exclaimed, frustration evident in his voice. It was the first time he had shown anger since waking up. "That was excellent for a first attempt," the physiotherapist assured him. "Rome wasn't built in a day, Mr. Mason." Later, during his session with the speech therapist, Marcos faced another difficult moment. The words that used to flow so naturally now seemed stuck in his throat, refusing to come out the way he wanted them to. "I want to speak properly," he said through his teeth, his hands clenched into fists of frustration. Patricia, the speech therapist, maintained her professional calm. "Every word you can pronounce is a victory, Mr. Mason. Let's try some breathing exercises before continuing." At lunchtime, Alice arrived home early from school, bringing renewed energy to the tense atmosphere. "Dad, I've brought you a surprise," she announced, pulling a small device out of her bag. "It's a tablet with a special app that Dr. Patricia recommended. It can help you communicate when words don't come easily." Marcos looked at the device with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. Clara realized that for him, needing technological help to communicate was yet another reminder of the limitations he now faced. "Look at this, Dad," Alice demonstrated, opening the app. "You can choose predefined phrases or type in what you want to say, and there are games to train your memory too." The afternoon brought an unexpected visit. Dr. Richardson arrived with new test results. "Mr. Mason, we've noticed some anomalies in your sleep patterns. Have you been experiencing frequent nightmares?" Marcos nodded slowly, his eyes meeting Clara's. "It's common in cases like yours," the doctor explained. "The brain is processing trauma and memories. I'm going to refer you to Dr. Elena Martinez, our psychiatrist who specializes in trauma." Clara felt a tightening in her chest. Another specialist. Another layer of complexity in the recovery process. "No, I want more doctors," Marcos protested, each word laden with exhaustion. "Love," Clara intervened gently. "We know it's hard, but we need all the help we can get." The rest of the afternoon passed in a heavy silence. Alice tried to lighten the mood by showing more of the tablet's features, but it was clear that Marcos was struggling with something other than his physical limitations. When evening came, after Alice had left with Lauren, Clara finally got a moment alone with her husband. "The nightmare," he began hesitantly, "was about the accident." Clara held his hand, waiting patiently for him to continue. "It was raining hard. I thought about you, about Alice. I wanted to get home." His words came out choppy, not just because of the physical difficulty, but because of the emotion. Then, darkness. "You don't have to go on if you don't want to," Clara whispered, seeing the suffering in his eyes. "I need to understand," he insisted. "Why did I survive?" The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Clara felt tears burn her eyes but kept her composure. "You survived because you still had so much to live for," she replied firmly. "Because Alice and I needed you. Because your love for us was stronger than the darkness." Marcos closed his eyes, letting his own tears flow freely. Clara hugged him carefully, feeling his tremors, sharing his pain. I can't be the same, he murmured against her shoulder. You don't have to be, she replied. Just be you, here and now. That's all we ask. The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. It was no longer filled with frustration and fear, but also with acceptance and hope. Outside, the lights of Boston shone as brightly as ever, reminding us that life goes on regardless of the challenges we face. Clara knew that day marked a turning point in Marcos' recovery. The challenges were not just physical, but emotional and psychological. The journey would be more complex than they had imagined, but they were together, and that was what mattered. While organizing her things to go home, Clara found a note that Alice had left on her tablet for her father. You're the strongest man I know, Dad. Not because of your muscles, but because of your heart. I love you. That's what they needed to remember. Strength didn't just come from the body, but from the soul, from love, and from the determination to keep going, one day at a time. Marcos' first session with Dr. Elena Martinez took place on a cloudy November afternoon. The office, and located on the 4th floor of the hospital, offered a panoramic view of Boston, although that day the city seemed shrouded in a melancholy haze. Mr. Mason, began the psychiatrist, her calm, melodious voice carrying a slight Spanish accent. Today we're just going to talk. No pressure, no expectations. Just tell me whatever comes to mind. Clara, who had been invited to take part in the first session, sat discreetly in a corner, watching her husband struggle to find the right words. Before the accident, Marcos began slowly. I was different. What do you mean different? Dr. Martinez encouraged. More strong, independent. His hands closed into frustrated fists. Now, I'm a burden. Clara wanted to protest, but the psychiatrist subtly signaled for her to remain silent. Why do you consider yourself a burden, Mr. Mason? Clara needs to do everything. Alice, so young, looking after her father. His voice shook. It shouldn't be like this. The session continued for an hour, revealing layers of guilt and frustration that Marcos had kept locked away. Dr. Martinez listened attentively, taking occasional notes, her face maintaining an expression of understanding without judgment. Back in room 507, Clara found Alice waiting with Lauren. The girl was bent over her homework, but her eyes showed concern. How was it, Dad? She asked as soon as they entered. Tiring, Marcos replied, using the tablet to supplement his limited speech. But necessary. Lauren, realizing the need for a private family moment, said goodbye discreetly. As soon as they were alone, Alice approached her father's bed with an envelope in her hand. I found these today going through the old boxes in the attic, she said, handing the envelope to Marcos. They're letters you used to write to Mom when you went away on business. Clara felt her heart race. Those letters belonged to a different time, when Marcos often traveled on business, always leaving little love notes for her to find during his absence. With trembling hands, Marcos opened the envelope. The letters, yellowed by time, still bore his firm, resolute handwriting, a painful contrast to his current condition. Dear Clara, he read slowly, his voice breaking. Today the Chicago sky is gray, but thinking of you brightens my day. Alice and Clara listened in silence as Marcos struggled to read his own words from the past. It was like hearing a distant echo of who he used to be, but there was something else there. An essence that remained unchanged, despite everything. You still write like that, Dad, Alice commented softly, not with pen and paper, but with your heart. Every time you try to speak, every effort you make, it's a love letter to us. Clara noticed a subtle change in Marcos' expression, a glimmer of understanding, perhaps even acceptance. The afternoon progressed with the usual therapy routine. Dr. Newman worked on balance exercises, celebrating when Marcos managed to stand for a full 2 minutes. Patricia, the speech therapist, noticed a significant improvement in the articulation of certain words. During dinner, something unexpected happened. While Clara was helping Marcos with his meal, he suddenly said, I remember our first dance. At our wedding, Clara asked, surprised by the spontaneous memory. No, he smiled slightly. Before, at that party, you wore a blue dress. Clara sat back, thrilled. It was a memory from 20 years ago, their first meeting at a company party. You said I looked like a mermaid, she recalled, laughing through her tears. You still do, he managed to say, his gaze full of love. Alice watched her parents interact with fascination. How did you fall in love? She asked, realizing that she had never really heard the full story. Clara looked at Marcos, who nodded encouragingly. Well, it all started at that party, she began, delving into memories. Your father was the new operations manager, and I worked in the finance department. The evening turned into a storytelling session, with Clara and Marcos taking turns to tell their love story, he with carefully chosen words, she filling in the gaps between them. Alice absorbed every detail, seeing her parents in a new light. Later, after Alice had gone home, Clara found Marcos contemplating the old letters again. Do you know what Dr. Martinez told me today? He asked, his voice clearer after a day of practice. That sometimes we need to lose something to discover what we never lost. Clara sat down next to him, taking his hand in hers. And what have you never lost? You, he answered simply. Alice, our love. The heart monitor set a steady rhythm, like a metronome marking the time of a song that continued to play, even though the melody had changed. Outside, the fog was beginning to dissipate, revealing the lights of the city. Tomorrow, Marcos said, using the tablet to form a complete sentence. I want to try writing a new letter, different from the old ones, but still with love. Clara smiled, feeling a wave of renewed hope. The words may have been different, the means of expression may have changed, but the sentiment remained the same, perhaps even deeper, truer, for having survived the darkness. The night progressed, and with it came the realization that some things don't change with time or circumstance. Love always finds a way to express itself, even when words fail, even when the body resists, even when the past seems too distant to revisit. The 15th day in hospital brought a different atmosphere to room 507. The medical team had decided that it was time for Marcos to start preparing for more intensive rehabilitation sessions in the hospital's specialist center. The move represented an important milestone in his recovery, but it also brought with it new challenges and apprehensions. Today we're going to try something new, announced Dr. Richardson during his morning visit. We think it's time you spent a few hours out of this room, Marcos. The rehabilitation center has more sophisticated equipment and a more conducive environment for your recovery. Clara watched her husband's expression change subtly. A mixture of fear and determination crossed his face. Since she had woken up, room 507 had become her sanctuary, her safe space. Leaving meant facing a bigger, more unpredictable world. I'm ready, Marcos replied, although his voice trembled slightly. The first trip to the rehabilitation center was a complex operation. A full team helped transfer Marcos to a special wheelchair. Clara walked alongside, noticing how he tensed up every time they passed other people in the corridor. The rehabilitation center was a large, bright space, with large windows offering a panoramic view of Boston. Other patients were doing their exercises, each on their own recovery journey. Welcome to our space, greeted David Chen, the occupational therapist who would be working with Marcos. Let's start slowly, getting to know the environment and setting some realistic goals. Over the next 2 hours, Marcos was introduced to various pieces of equipment and exercises. Every movement was a challenge, every attempt a battle against weakened muscles and impaired coordination. But there was something different in his eyes, a renewed determination to see other patients making progress in their own recoveries. Look over there, David pointed to an older man practicing with a walker. Mr. Williams had a stroke 6 months ago. When he arrived, then he could barely sit up on his own. Now he's almost walking independently. Marcos watched in silence, absorbing the information. Clara could see the cogs turning in his mind, calculating possibilities, setting goals. When Alice arrived after school, she found her father exhausted but with a different sparkle in his eyes. How was it, Dad? She asked, sitting down next to his wheelchair. Difficult, he replied, using a combination of speech and tablet. But I saw others, struggling too. I'm not alone. Alice smiled, understanding the depth of that realization. You were never alone, Dad. But now you can see that more clearly. The afternoon brought an unexpected surprise. Lauren showed up with a group of neighbors, each carrying something to help decorate the hospital room. We thought we'd bring a bit more life in here, Lauren explained, hanging family photos on the walls. If you're going to spend more time in the rehabilitation center, you need to have a welcoming place to come back to. Clara watched as the neighbors transformed the sterile environment into something more personal. Robert, the next-door neighbor, brought over a small radio. For when you want to listen to your favorite songs, he explained. Music can be a great ally in recovery. Margaret, an elderly woman who lived in the house opposite, brought a handmade blanket. For the cold days, she said with a kind smile. And to remind you that there's a whole neighborhood rooting for you. Marcos watched everything with watery eyes, clearly touched by the community's gesture of affection. Using his tablet, he managed to say, "I never imagined so much support." In the evening, after everyone had left, Clara found Marcos trying to write something on his tablet. She approached him curiously. "What are you doing, love?" "List of goals," he showed her. On the screen, with the help of the spell checker, he had written, 1. Walk by the end of the year. 2. Speak without tablet in 3 months. 3. Return home. 4. Dance with Clara again. Clara felt her heart squeeze as she read the last item. "We'll make it," she promised, holding her hand. "One step at a time. Today, I saw hope," Marcos said slowly. "In the people, in the center, everyone, fighting, everyone, making progress. And you will progress too," Clara assured him. "You're already progressing. Every day you're stronger, more determined." The silence that followed was filled by the soft sound of the new radio, playing an old song they used to dance to. Clara began to sway gently, holding Marcos' hands. "Do you remember that song?" she asked. "Our first Christmas. Together," he replied, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "We'll dance to that song again," she promised. "When you're ready, no matter how long it takes." The night progressed, and with it came a renewed sense of possibility. Room 507, now decorated with memories and affection, no longer felt like a medical prison, but a starting point for a new journey. Marcos fell asleep holding the list of objectives, and Clara noticed that his expression was more serene. The day had brought more than physical exercise. It had brought connection, community, and, most importantly, hope. Outside, Boston shone under the night sky, its lights like beacons guiding the way home. Clara knew the journey would be long, but today they had taken several important steps. Some physical, some emotional, all equally significant on the road to recovery. The third week of recovery began with a particularly challenging morning. Marcos woke up from another nightmare, more vivid than the previous ones. Sweat poured down his face as he struggled to regain control of his breathing. Clara, who had arrived at the hospital earlier, found him still agitated. "Was it the same dream?" she asked softly, sitting down next to him. "Different," he replied, using the tablet to complete his thoughts. "This time, I saw Alice, in the car, with me." The revelation made Clara shudder. Dr. Martinez had explained that it was common for recovering patients to develop fears and anxieties related to their loved ones, especially after trauma. Mr. Mason, Nurse Beverly, entered the room, carrying the morning medications. "Dr. Richardson wants to start hydrotherapy today. Do you think you're ready?" Marcos nodded, although Clara could sense his apprehension. The therapeutic pool represented a new challenge: water, depth, vulnerability. The hydrotherapy session was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Jennifer Walsh, the hydrotherapist, met them at the rehabilitation center's heated pool. "The water is going to be our ally," she explained as the team helped Marcos into the pool with special equipment. "Here you'll feel less of the weight of your body, which makes it easier to move." The first few minutes were tense. Marcos held on tightly to the support bars, his eyes revealing a fear that went beyond the physical. "Breathe with me," Jennifer instructed. "Feel the water supporting you. You're safe here." Gradually, his muscles began to relax. The warm water seemed to dissolve some of the tension built up in his body. With Jennifer's support, he began to make gentle movements. "That's it," she encouraged. "Let the water be part of the movement." Clara watched from the edge of the pool, noticing how every little bit of progress seemed to restore some of Marcos' confidence. After 40 minutes, when the session ended, there was a different sparkle in his eyes. "How did it feel?" Clara asked as they helped him dry off. "Light," he replied. "Like before." The afternoon brought an unexpected visit. Robert Miller, one of the patients Marcos had met at the rehabilitation center, stopped by his room. "Hey, battle buddy," Robert greeted from his wheelchair. "I saw you in hydrotherapy today. Impressive for a first session." Marcos smiled, recognizing in the other man a warrior spirit similar to his own. Robert had suffered a serious motorcycle accident 6 months earlier and was learning to walk again. "How do you cope?" Marcos asked, referring to the daily challenges. "One day at a time," Robert answered honestly. "And when the days get too heavy, I share the weight with those I love." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Alice, who was returning from school with excited news. "Dad, I got an A+ on my paper about overcoming," she exclaimed, but stopped when she noticed the serious expression on her father's face. "Did something happen?" Marcos hesitated, looking at Clara for support. She nodded encouragingly. "Nightmares," he admitted to his daughter. "About the accident, but now you're in them." Alice sat on the edge of the bed, taking her father's hand. "They're just dreams, Dad. I'm here, safe. You are too." "I'm afraid," he continued, the words coming out with difficulty, "of not being strong enough and to protect you." "But you already protect us," Alice replied with wisdom beyond her years. "Every time you fight to improve, every small victory, it protects us. It gives us strength." Robert Yeard, who had remained silent, added, "You know, Marcos, sometimes the greatest strength lies in admitting our vulnerabilities." The afternoon progressed with more therapies, but something had changed. Marcos faced each exercise with renewed determination, as if the honest conversation with Alice and Robert's words had unlocked something inside him. During the session with Dr. Martinez later on, Marcos was able to articulate his fears better. "The nightmares, they're not just about the accident," he explained, combining speech and tablet. "They're about losing everything. Again. It's natural to have these fears," the psychiatrist replied. "But look how much support you have, how much love. Sometimes we need to allow ourselves to be supported by those we love." In the evening, after Alice had gone home, Clara found Marcos writing on his tablet again. "What are you writing today?" "A letter. To you," he showed her. "About fears and hopes." Clara silently read the words he had managed to type. "Dear Clara and Alice, every day is a battle, against my body, against my fears. But you are my light in the dark, my strength when I weaken. Forgive my moments of doubt. Accept my infinite gratitude. I promise to keep fighting, not just for me, but for us. With all my love, Marcos." Clara felt tears run down her face as she hugged her husband gently. "We're fighting with you too, love, every step of the way." The sound of the rain began to patter softly against the window, but this time Marcos didn't tense up. Perhaps because he was finally understanding that some storms need to be faced in order to see the rainbow that follows. The night wore on in Boston, and in room 507, a family continued their journey of healing, not just physically, but emotionally. The inner storms would still come, but now they knew they could face them together, one day at a time, one fear at a time, one victory at a time. The end of November brought with it a more intense cold to Boston, and with it, new discoveries in room 507. During one particularly frosty morning, while Clara was organizing some documents, she found an old folder among Marcos' belongings that had been stored after the accident. "Love," she called out, holding up a yellowed envelope. "I found something here." Marcos, who was finishing his morning exercises with Dr. Newman, turned around curiously. Clara approached, taking a seat next to him on the bed as soon as the physiotherapist had left. "These are documents from your last trip," she explained softly. "The one from the day of the accident." Marcos' body tensed. He reached out shakily for the envelope, and Clara noticed how his fingers had become stronger over the last few weeks. "Do you want me to open it?" she asked, and he nodded. Inside the envelope were papers from a conference in New York, hotel receipts and, surprisingly, a letter addressed to Clara that had never been delivered. The date marked was the day of the accident. "Dear Clara," she began to read aloud, her voice trembling slightly. "I made an important decision today. After years of traveling constantly, I've realized that it's time for a change. I've accepted an offer to work exclusively in Boston. I don't want to miss any more moments with you and our Alice." Clara stopped, her hands shaking. This was a revelation she had never known, a decision that could have changed their lives, interrupted by fate that rainy night. "I remember," Marcos said, his voice clearer than usual. "I was coming back to tell you." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Alice, who entered the room carrying her latest school project. "Dad, our mom, look at this," she exclaimed, but stopped when she noticed the emotional atmosphere in the room. What happened? Clara explained about the letter, and Alice listened intently, her eyes filling with tears. So you had already decided to stay at home longer? She asked her father. Yes, he replied, using the tablet to complete his thoughts. I wanted to be a more present father. Fate had other plans. Dr. Martinez, who arrived for the scheduled session, found the family in a moment of shared vulnerability. I see there's been an important discovery today, she observed, noticing the scattered papers. Doctor, Marcos began, his determination evident. I need to understand. Why that night? The psychiatrist sat down, creating a safe space for this difficult conversation. Sometimes, Marcos, life presents us with unexpected detours along the way. The question is not why it happened, but how we choose to move forward. But he was trying to do the right thing. Alice interjected, her voice embittered. He was coming back to stay with us longer. And now he's here, Clara added softly. In a different way than we planned, but he's here. The afternoon progressed with a different emotional intensity. During hydrotherapy, Marcos showed renewed strength, as if the discovery of the letter had unlocked something inside him. Excellent progress today, Jennifer commented, watching as he managed to keep his balance in the water with more confidence. Robert, who was in the pool for his own session, noticed the change in his friend. Something happened today, didn't it? You look different. Marcos nodded, using gestures and short words to share the discovery of the letter. Robert listened attentively, offering that kind of understanding that only someone who has also faced adversity can give. You know, Robert commented, sometimes we need to lose something to gain a completely new perspective. In the evening, after Alice had gone home, Clara and Marcos had a moment alone. She had put the letter in a simple frame, next to the family photos. To remember, she explained, that even in the most difficult times, you were thinking of us. Marcos picked up his tablet, typing slowly. I still am. I always have been. Even when I was asleep. You were my reason to go on. Clara held his hand, feeling how it was stronger, firmer. You know what's funny? You wanted to spend more time at home, and now you have all the time in the world to be with us. A small smile appeared on Marcos' face. Not exactly as I planned. Life is rarely as we planned, she replied. But sometimes, in its most unexpected detours, we find our greatest gifts. The sound of the night city filtered through the window, mixing with the constant beeping of the monitors. Clara watched as Marcos looked at the framed letter, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sadness and determination. Tomorrow, he said slowly, I want to try walking. Clara nodded, recognizing in those words not just a physical goal, but a declaration of renewed purpose. The letter had revealed more than a decision from the past. It had shown that, even before the accident, Marcos was already choosing a path of transformation. The night wore on in Boston, and in room 507, a man and a woman shared a moment of deep understanding. Sometimes the most important revelations don't come in big dramatic moments, but in small pieces of yellowed paper, in decisions never made that somehow still find their way to change our lives. The morning started differently at Massachusetts General Hospital. A palpable energy filled the air of the rehabilitation center, where a small crowd gathered discreetly. Clara, Alice, the medical team, and even other patients were waiting for the moment that Marcos had determined for himself. Today, he would try to take his first steps without the full support of the equipment. Dr. Richardson had initially suggested waiting a few more weeks, but something in Marcos' determination convinced him to authorize the attempt, as long as all precautions were taken. Remember, Dr. Newman instructed as she adjusted the partial support device. There's no rush. If you feel any discomfort, we'll stop immediately. Marcos nodded, his eyes fixed on the path in front of him, a distance of approximately 3 meters between the parallel bars. To many, it would seem an insignificant distance, but to him it represented a whole universe of possibilities. You can do it, Dad, Alice whispered, holding Clara's hand tightly. The first movement was the hardest. Marcos held the parallel bars, his arms shaking with the effort of supporting part of his weight. Dr. Newman positioned herself behind him, ready to provide support if necessary. Take a deep breath, she instructed. Concentrate on one movement at a time. With a visible effort, Marcos lifted his right foot. The movement was small, unstable, but it was real. The silence in the rehabilitation center was absolute. broken only by the sound of his concentrated breathing. "That's it," encouraged the physiotherapist. "Now transfer the weight gradually." Her foot touched the floor a few centimeters in front of her. One step, small, shaky, but a real step. Clara felt tears run down her face as she watched her husband struggle against gravity and his own limitations. Robert, in his wheelchair, was the first to break the silence. "Go for it, warrior." The encouragement seemed to give Marcos extra strength. With renewed determination, he began to move his other foot. Every movement was a battle, every centimeter a victory. "Dad," Alice called softly, "remember when you taught me to ride a bike? You said the secret was to look forward, never down." Marcos looked up, meeting his daughter's eyes. In them, he saw reflected all the strength he needed. One more step, then another. Halfway through, his legs began to shake more intensely. Sweat dripped down her face and her breathing was heavy. "Do you want to stop?" asked Dr. Newman, noticing his effort. "No," he replied firmly. "Continue." Clara watched, her heart divided between pride and concern. Marcos, every step seemed to carry the weight of all the years lost, all the battles fought in silence. When there were only 2 steps to go, his legs gave way slightly. Dr. Newman quickly offered support, but Marcos refused with a gesture. "Alone," he insisted. "I need to finish. Alone." The last step was the hardest. His whole body was shaking with the effort, but there was a fierce determination in his eyes. With one final movement, he completed the course. The explosion of applause that followed echoed through the rehabilitation center. Alice ran to hug her father, while Clara approached with watery eyes. "You did it, love," she whispered, holding his face between her hands. "You really did it." Dr. Richardson, who had been watching everything discreetly, approached with a genuine smile. "Impressive, Mr. Mason, but now you need to rest." As the team helped Marcos back into his wheelchair, other patients came up to greet him. Each of them understood, in their own way, the magnitude of this achievement. Back in room 507, exhausted but fulfilled, Marcos used his tablet to express his thoughts. "Today, I didn't just take physical steps, I took steps towards who I want to be again." Clara sat next to him, holding his hand. "You're already everything you need to be, love. Every day, every effort, every small victory. It's all part of who you are now." Alice, who had left briefly, returned with something in her hands, the old family photo album. "Look at this, Dad," she said, opening to a particular page. "This is from the day I learned to walk. You held me just like Dr. Newman held you today." Marcos looked at the photograph, touching it gently. In it, a younger Marcos held a baby Alice, her first steps captured forever on film. "Life is circular," he commented, his voice tired but satisfied. In the evening, after the excitement of the day had passed, Clara found Marcos awake, staring out of the window at the lights of Boston. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Next goal," he replied. "Dancing. With you." Clara smiled, remembering the list he had made. "One step at a time, love. You've already taken several today." The silence that followed was comfortable, full of promise and possibility. Outside, the city continued its nocturnal dance of lights and shadows, indifferent to the small victories taking place within its walls. But in room 507, every moment was precious. Every achievement was celebrated, and every step was a reminder that the impossible is sometimes just a matter of persistence and love. The night progressed, and with it came the certainty that that first step was not just a milestone in Marcos' physical recovery, it was a symbol of his complete journey, a testament to his inner strength, and a gift to everyone who walked alongside him on this journey of healing and rediscovery. The beginning of December brought with it not only the most intense cold, but also a new phase in Marcos' recovery. The success of his first steps had energized the entire medical team, and the rehabilitation plan was adjusted to include more ambitious goals. That particular morning, as snowflakes fell gently outside the hospital window, Dr. Richardson gathered the family for an important talk. "Considering the exceptional progress of the last few weeks," he began, consulting his notes, "we believe we can start planning your discharge from hospital, Mr. Mason." The word discharge hung in the air like a snowflake, beautiful and delicate, but carrying with it a complexity of emotions. "How long?" Marcos asked, his voice firmer after weeks of speech therapy. We estimate another 3 weeks, the doctor replied. Of course, you'll continue with intensive rehabilitation as an outpatient, but you'll be able to sleep at home, in your own environment. Clara felt her heart racing. Home. The word carried both hope and apprehension. The room they had prepared for Marcos years ago, untouched throughout his coma, was finally going to be used. We'll need to make some adaptations, explained Michael, the social worker. We'll need to install grab rails, an access ramp, adapt the bathroom. I've already started a list, Clara interrupted, always practical, and I've been researching specialist companies. The morning progressed with a different energy. During the physiotherapy session, Marcos showed even more determination than usual. Someone's inspired today, commented Dr. Newman, observing how hard he was working on his strengthening exercises. I need to be ready, he replied, concentrating on lifting the adapted weights. Home. Robert Truss, who was doing his own exercises nearby, smiled understandingly. The idea of going home changes everything, doesn't it? It gives it a new purpose. At lunchtime, Alice arrived home early from school, bringing with her drawings and plans of the house. Look at this, Dad, she explained, spreading the papers out on the side table. Me and Uncle James, you remember him, don't you? The architect, have drawn up some plans to adapt your office on the first floor. That way you don't have to worry about the stairs at first. Marcos looked at the drawings, touched by his daughter's dedication. The office that used to be her work refuge would be transformed into a space for healing and transition. You thought of everything, he commented, using a combination of speech and tablet. In fact, Clara added, the whole neighborhood has mobilized. Lauren is organizing a joint effort to help with the adaptations, and Mr. Thompson has offered his carpentry expertise. The afternoon brought a special session with Dr. Martinez, focusing on the expectations and fears related to coming home. It's normal to feel anxious, the psychiatrist explained. Coming home means facing memories and routines of a life that has been interrupted. I'm afraid, Marcos admitted, his voice low, of not being enough. Enough for what? The doctor asked gently. For normal life. To be a husband, a father. Clara, who was taking part in the session, held his hand. Love, you're already all that. In a different way, perhaps, but no less important. The conversation was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Jennifer, the hydrotherapist, with a special proposal. I have an idea, she announced. How about we start working on dance exercises in the pool? Marco's eyes sparkled with interest. Clara knew he hadn't forgotten his goal of dancing with her again. The water can provide the necessary support, Jennifer explained. We can start with simple movements, slow rhythms. When do we start? Marcos asked anxiously. How about now? The pool session was different from the previous ones. With soft music playing in the background, Jennifer guided Marcos and Clara in movements that vaguely resembled the steps of a waltz. That's right, she encouraged. Let the water be part of the movement. For a moment, floating in the warm water, Marcos and Clara found an echo of their old intimacy. It wasn't a conventional dance, but it carried all the emotion and connection they had always shared. In the evening, after Alice had gone home, Marcos asked to see the house adaptation projects again. I want to understand everything, he explained. To be part of the process. Clara sat down next to him, and together they began to plan their new reality. Every decision, no matter how small, was a step towards the future they were rebuilding. Do you know what I want most? He asked, using the tablet to form more complex sentences. To sit in our garden, to watch the sunset with you. Clara smiled, remembering the countless evenings they had shared in that garden. The garden is waiting for you, she replied. Alice has kept her roses alive all these years. The snow continued to fall outside, covering Boston with a white blanket that seemed to purify the city. In room 507, a man and a woman were planning their future, aware of the challenges ahead, but strengthened by the love that had kept them together through the years of darkness. 3 weeks, Marcos muttered, looking out of the window. 3 weeks until home. Clara nodded, knowing that those 3 weeks would be intense, full of both physical and emotional preparations. But she also knew that, after 6 years of waiting, 3 weeks was just the blink of an eye. The night advanced, bringing with it promises of a future that, although different from what they had planned, was full of possibilities. In room 507, the echoes of that future could already be heard. mixed with the beats of two hearts that never stopped dancing together, even when separated by the silence of the coma. The calendar on the wall of room 507 marked 2 weeks until Marcos was due to be discharged. The hospital was buzzing with activity, no longer the urgency of immediate recovery, but the meticulous preparation for a successful transition. That morning, Clara arrived earlier than usual, carrying a thick folder with documents and a laptop. The multidisciplinary team had arranged a full meeting to discuss the transition plan. "Good morning, love," she greeted Marcos, who was already awake, practicing his morning vocalization exercises. "Ready for the big meeting?" "More than ready," he replied, his determination evident in every carefully articulated word. The hospital conference room was full. Dr. Richardson was leading the meeting, accompanied by Dr. Newman, Patricia, Jennifer, Dr. Martinez, and Michael, the social worker. Lauren was also present, representing the neighborhood support group. "Let's start with the physical adaptations to the house," Michael began, projecting photos and plans onto the wall. "The occupational therapy team has already done an initial assessment of the environment." Clara opened her laptop, revealing a detailed spreadsheet she had prepared. "We've divided the modifications into 3 phases," she explained. "The first, essential for Marcos' arrival, is already underway. The neighborhood task force starts this weekend," Lauren added. "We have carpenters, electricians, and even a volunteer architect." Dr. Newman then took the floor. "It's crucial that we keep up the intensity of the physiotherapy. I suggest home sessions 3 times a week, in addition to visits to the rehabilitation center." "What about the psychological part?" Clara asked, turning to Dr. Martinez. "The transition will be challenging," the psychiatrist replied honestly. "Marcos will be facing not only physical challenges but also emotional ones as he returns to an environment full of memories." Marcos, who had remained silent, using his tablet to take notes, finally spoke. "I'm prepared to face everything." The meeting continued for 2 hours, every aspect of the transition being thoroughly discussed and planned. When they finished, Clara had a new list of tasks and responsibilities, but also a renewed sense of support and hope. Back in the bedroom, they found Alice waiting with a surprise, a miniature model of the second floor of the house, made from cardboard and school materials. "Look, Dad," she explained excitedly. "This is where your new hospital bed will be, and we've installed a big TV here. The bathroom will have grab rails here and here." Marcos watched his daughter's dedication with watery eyes. Using his tablet, he typed, "You've thought of everything, Princess." The afternoon brought a special session of occupational therapy, focused on everyday activities that Marcos would face at home. Daniel, the therapist, had set up a small circuit simulating different domestic situations. "We're going to practice transfers from the chair to different surfaces," he explained. "Bed, sofa, toilet. These are movements that need to become automatic." Clara watched intently, memorizing the correct assistance techniques. She knew that she would soon be responsible for helping Marcos with many of these activities. "Don't be afraid to ask for help," Daniel emphasized, noticing her concern. "You don't have to do everything on your own." During hydrotherapy, Jennifer continued with the water dance exercises, but now with an additional purpose. "These movements will help with your mobility at home," she explained. "The fluidity you develop in the water can be translated to movements on dry land." In the evening, after an intense day of preparations, Clara found Marcos looking thoughtfully at the model Alice had made of the house. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sitting down next to him. "How? Everything has changed," he replied slowly. "The house, our life, us. Change isn't always bad," she commented softly. "Sometimes they're just different ways of getting to the same place." "What place?" he asked, curious. "The place where we're together," she replied, holding his hand. "Where we are family." Marcos smiled, a smile that was becoming more frequent and natural. Using his tablet, he typed, "Do you know what else I want to do when I get home?" "What?" "Sit in the garden with you and Alice. Hear about all the days I missed. Create new memories." Clara felt tears well up in her eyes. "We're going to do all that, love, and so much more." The night wore on in Boston, and in room 507 preparations continued for a new phase in the Mason family's life. Every detail planned, every adaptation considered, every moment anticipated was a step towards a future that, although different from the one imagined, promised to be full of love and possibilities. Marcos fell asleep holding the small model of the house, and Clara noticed how serene his face was. The next 2 weeks would be intense, full of preparations and anxiety, but also of hope and determination. Outside, the city lights shone as brightly as ever, silent witnesses to yet another chapter in this story of love and overcoming. In room 507, the dreams of returning home began to take shape, one preparation at a time, one step at a time. A love that never stopped growing, even in the most challenging moments. The end. If you were in Clara's shoes, which moment would have been more challenging? The 6 years of waiting with Marcos in a coma, or the current process of readaptation, watching her husband struggle daily to regain his autonomy? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.